Morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. This morning's Green Recovery Roundtable, What Women Want, with Green Party Leader Annamie Paul and guests Nancy Mitchell and Katie Davey, will now begin. La table ronde de ce matin sur ce que les femmes veulent, avec Annamie Paul, chef du Parti Vert, et les invités Nancy Mitchell et Katie Davey, va maintenant commencer. Merci.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. And first and foremost, we wish everyone a very, very, very happy International Women's Day. Je veux souhaiter tout le monde une excellente journée internationale des femmes. It is, as far as I'm concerned, every day is a day to celebrate women and their accomplishments and their work and everything that they do all around the world. But it is nice to have one day where we shine a particular spotlight on women. It's very nice to think about women celebrating all over the world, think about our solidarity today, and thinking about, in particular, over given the moment we're living in now, our resilience, our strength, and how women have absolutely been at the heart of helping us get through this incredibly difficult moment in human history. And so first, I want to say a very, very, very big thank you to every single woman everywhere in the world who has helped to keep us safe during this pandemic, who has helped to advance knowledge during this pandemic, who has done the essential work during this pandemic to keep our communities running, to keep our economies running. Thank you so much for everything that you have done. Whether you're a frontline worker, whether you're an epidemiologist, whether you are bagging groceries in the local supermarket, every single one of these gestures has made such a difference in your communities and around the world, and we are so grateful. And more than anything, the fitting tribute of thanks for that is to figure out how women in particular, who have been so disproportionately impacted by the negative consequences of this pandemic, how we can make sure during the rest of this pandemic, women are protected. And then also as we emerge from the pandemic, how we can make sure that our green recovery, our post-pandemic green recovery has women right at the heart of it, covers all of the areas that have been insufficiently addressed during this pandemic so that we don't end up back here again. And this is something we have to think about for Canada and also for around the world. Alors d'abord, je voulais absolument remercier de ma part et de la part de tous nos membres, toutes les femmes ici au Canada et partout au monde qui ont participé à protéger leur communauté, avancer nos connaissances, faire les recherches qui ont résulté dans les vaccins, qui ont fait les travaux essentiels et parfois très dangereux pendant la pandémie. Tous nos travailleuses de première ligne, tous nos travailleuses dans les services essentiels, tous nos chercheuses, tous nos docteurs. Merci, merci, merci infiniment à vous. Je crois que l'important maintenant, c'est de considérer comment nous allons mieux protéger les femmes dans l'avenir, pendant la durée de la pandémie, mais aussi après la pandémie. On sait que les femmes étaient fortement touchées par les conséquences mauvaises de la pandémie et on doit faire mieux. On doit mieux protéger et soutenir les femmes. Et la journée des femmes internationale des femmes, c'est une excellente opportunité de considérer tout ça. Alors, j'ai le plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui avec deux femmes leaders, Katie Davey et Nancy Mitchell, deux femmes leaders qui vont partager leur expérience, leur pensée sur la pandémie et les impacts sur les femmes, et aussi comment nous pouvons créer une société qui protège les femmes mieux et les soutient mieux. I'm so pleased to have with me today Katie Davey and Annamie Mitchell, two women leaders who are going to help guide us through a discussion on the impact of the pandemic on women, and then also what we hope to see post-pandemic, what we want to see from a post-pandemic green recovery. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're just going to jump right into our conversation. So Katie, do you want to introduce yourself first, and then Nancy?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's a real pleasure to have this conversation and really kick off International Women's Day talking about both how women have been impacted by the pandemic, but what we can do about it as well, and a really action-oriented conversation. I myself run Femme Wonk, which is a podcast, book club, and consulting organization that focuses on policy, current affairs, and politics, quite frankly, from an inclusion lens. So I'm thrilled to be having this conversation. I really strive to make the links between economic and social policy. I don't think you can separate them. I think they're one and the same. And this conversation, I think, will really demonstrate that. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Katie. Nancy?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Good morning. Happy International Women's Day. Great to be part of this conversation with yourself and also Katie. So I'm Nancy. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm currently a member of the Prime Minister's Youth Council, which is a group of young people providing nonpartisan advice to some of our elected officials, as well as engaging with other young people and community leaders. And so I'll just preface by saying, of course, that I will just speak on behalf of myself and not the entire council, but happy to share those experiences. And then currently I also support the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. And in the past, I have worked for UN Women, both in Bangkok and in Canada. So yeah, really happy to be here. Happy to have this discussion.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having you both. And I guess it's always, people are still getting to know me around the country. So I suppose it's important for me to say as well that, particularly in the context of International Women's Day, that after finishing my graduate studies at Princeton, I came back to Canada specifically determined to understand why women and equity-seeking groups continue to be so underrepresented in Canadian politics and public policy, and then building capacity around that and training members of all of those groups to run for office, but also to seek senior roles in the public service. And so the issue of equality, equity, inclusion is a longstanding commitment. And then having worked for a number of years in international affairs for our country, and then also for multilateral institutions, much of the work focused on women and women with respect to development and the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm excited about this conversation. This is an important day. The pandemic has definitely thrown a big spotlight on this issue. So really nice to be with you both. And we are going to jump right into it. Katie and Nancy, we know that there has been a tremendous impact. This pandemic has particularly touched women. People are calling this a really feminized pandemic. Can you share with us just some of your observations about what the pandemic has maybe reminded us of in terms of where we are as women, both in this country and internationally? And I'll just open it up to either of you to start. I don't know, Katie, do you want to get us going?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think honestly, probably the three of us would agree with this. The challenges and issues that the pandemic has highlighted that face women are not new. They're just being amplified, and a light is actually being shined on them. Women have been taking on the majority of care work and continue to. Women have been disproportionately, impacted by labor market changes and shifts because they tend to be highly represented in caregiving work. And in a time in a pandemic when these types of roles are really being highlighted, not only are we seeing the tremendous inequities that exist by women being disproportionately represented in caregiving work and precarious work, but we're also seeing just how important those roles are. And so the value proposition in some ways has shifted in the public dialogue, but it's not something that's new to us. It's just something that we now are really seeing highlighted in a meaningful way. I think, back to this conversation we're having around childcare in Canada right now, this is not new. This conversation has been ongoing for decades, but new people are joining this conversation at this moment in time because they're seeing the impact it has on women and primary caregivers when they don't have access to childcare and what that means for the labor market and the economy. So I think, it's important, especially today, to recognize that so many of the challenges we're seeing in the pandemic are not new, but rather being amplified and brought into public for, in some ways the first time. And that means now we can finally, hopefully, garner more broad level support for changing and rectifying some of these longstanding barriers and challenges that women have faced.
You're absolutely right. And it's very important to have, when you're in public policy, it's very important to have a variety of perspectives. It's one of the reasons we want more diversity in public policy. In the case of my family, I know how long these issues have lasted because I think about my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother was a personal support worker and would have been and worked in long-term care homes, worked in the hospitals, and would have been very, very impacted by what was going on now. And my mom was worked full-time and had 4 children. I don't know what she would have done for childcare had she been a young mother when the pandemic struck. And this is 30 years ago, right? So these things, as you said, are longstanding issues. Nancy, for young women, we know that the pandemic has been particularly tough, and we're already talking about how some of the impacts are permanent, perhaps permanent, and are going to affect the permanent or long-term prospects, income earning prospects of young women. We know students have been hit really hard. What have you observed during the pandemic?
Yeah, a lot of the work that I've been doing during the pandemic has focused on women entrepreneurs. And so looking at, prior to the pandemic, we saw that women entrepreneurs are a really vital part of Canada's economy. But we see that a lot of women entrepreneurs tend to be SMEs, self-financed or seeking government grants or government funding. We see that there's kind of a disconnect between a lot of the times we think that entrepreneurship is linked to innovation, which is linked to STEM and tech. And of course, there are women entrepreneurs operating in all sectors. But women entrepreneurs are also operating in, creative industries or service industries. And so sometimes are left out of these kind of like traditional notions of what we think entrepreneurship and innovation is. And then I think also with the pandemic, as Katie mentioned, a lot of women are subject to extra or additional responsibilities of childcare now that, childcare facilities, schools are closing, et cetera. And this has been, an increased responsibility for self-employed or women entrepreneurs. And we see that if women entrepreneurs were experiencing perhaps inequities in funding prior to the pandemic, this has only been amplified with the pandemic. And so I would say, we see that women entrepreneurs and self-employed women have been really hit by the pandemic. And just as a disclaimer, women entrepreneurs are not a homogenous group. We have Black women entrepreneurs, Indigenous women entrepreneurs who are, disproportionately impacted. And so when we're building back better or looking at the Canadian economy, just ensuring that women entrepreneurs, self-employed women, et cetera, are also, at the forefront of this and are considered as well.
But let's dig down into that a little bit more, that last point, because you're absolutely right. Women we're not a monolithic community. And even within the context of the pandemic, we have not all been as negatively impacted. The negative impact has not been evenly distributed. So maybe disaggregating for a second, Katie, can we talk about how the pandemic has impacted racialized women, Indigenous women, immigrant women? You want to just maybe touch on that? And we'll come back to you, of course, Nancy, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, what has been really, again, to your point, an important outcome of the pandemic is the call and the desire and put in practice in some cases disaggregated data for a number of reasons. There's been really important work, I think, that's come out of the city of Toronto, especially on this topic and the impact of Black Canadians and Black Torontonians and what they're facing in the pandemic and what that actually looks like on the ground. But I think, when we look at the numbers, they're across the board, they're kind of eye-popping. So RBC just recently, I think last week, put out a study that highlighted, I think, trying to remember the exact number now, but I'm quite sure it was 500,000 women exited the labor force as of January. And at this point, 200,000 are still kind of now long-term unemployed, and 100,000 have left the labor market entirely. So that just means they're not kind of looking for work. They've left the labor market. They don't even count now, quote unquote, when we look at unemployment numbers. And so if you peel back that layer and you do disaggregated data and you look at what Indigenous women, racialized women, Black women, immigrant women face, those numbers are much more stark, and the impacts are even more dire, quite frankly. And so I think what that tells us is not only can we not have a rebuild approach that's one size fits all, but we can't even have, an approach that assumes the challenges and barriers faced are, again, a one size fits all. I don't think that's something we've really done a lot in public policy across Canada. We have very much been a country that says, here is a program and, fit inside of it, quite frankly. And CERB, for example, although it was, quite frankly, revolutionary as a program, it was a one size fits all. So I think as we go into rebuilding, really understanding how you build public policy that is more responsive and intersectional will be, something that could become a strength, but also if done poorly or not done at all, will just further amplify what we've seen in the pandemic as far as intersectionality goes.
Nancy, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I think also in terms of funding, ensuring that funding is equitably distributed instead of, funding for women, perhaps just ensuring that this is going to all the different, women in all their diversity so that, Black women entrepreneurs, Indigenous women entrepreneurs, et cetera, can really take full advantage of all the opportunities and ensure that they have, business continuity and business growth. So yeah, equitable funding as well.
So maybe then I always try to, when we're having these discussions, we have to recall that we are still in the midst of a pandemic. It is not over. It still won't be over for a while, even as we see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I always, when I have the privilege of speaking with people like you, I always ask, what are the things we could be doing right now that would make a difference right now? What are there things, we still know that there are people that are falling through the cracks. We still know that we haven't fully managed to support everyone during this pandemic. So if there were a couple of items that you say right now, if we were to do this today or tomorrow, it would have an immediate positive impact for women. What would those things be? And Nancy, I know that you're working with a particular demographic of women, but for that group or others, what would be your ideas? The wish list.
That's tough because I do think that a lot of the conversations have centered around what can we be doing in the future. And so a lot of the things that we've been discussing are perhaps like, long-term goals. But in the short term, I definitely think, and I do think that there's been a lot of funding that has gone out, and I really appreciate that. And I think also just ensuring that, I was writing a piece a few months ago on how the different stakeholders, so public sector, private sector, civil society, can all kind of band together to support women in the economy, women entrepreneurs, et cetera. And I think just increased collaboration to ensure that particularly, and I'll say women entrepreneurs, because that's what I've been working on, but women entrepreneurs have access to, the digital skills that are going to help them grow their businesses, ensuring that they have, the proper support in seeking procurement details, procurement contracts with the government, for example. I was reading a piece by the YWCA that said that 88% of underrepresented women entrepreneurs, so women with disabilities, Indigenous women, women of color, et cetera, have lost contracts. And so just some support to help women ensure that they're able to, regain these contracts or be in beneficial contract positions. I think just supporting to ensure that there's like increased collaboration, that there's workshops, that there's opportunities for women to pitch their businesses, et cetera, in the short term, because I think these opportunities may have been lost in the pandemic.
Okay, great. And Katie, what are the missing pieces right now?
Paid sick leave. I wrote a piece in Policy Options actually last week that highlights, some of the practical and political barriers to why we haven't seen paid sick leave when all of the evidence and research suggests that workplace rather spread is what has really been proliferating over these last few months, and that again, especially women in precarious work and care work just don't have access to paid sick leave. And it's not just women, that's, across the country, broad swaths. This is something that would be a very meaningful impact. Yes, it requires legislative change in every province, but it's, again, literally a line in the legislation. It is not rocket science. That would be an immediate impact. I think the other immediate impact is just ensuring that there is availability of childcare, and whatever that looks like. So I was speaking with a group of childcare stakeholders recently, and one person said, the federal government could commit to providing the same level of support that we've seen in the pandemic, through the next 18 months, for example, to allow for childcare facilities to be able to kind of predictably accept and plan for what it looks like to, again, adapt to the pandemic. So I think that is the other thing. And then in the medium term, I think really affordable housing is another huge thing that really needs to be a priority. And a number of these things, so, a childcare system, affordable housing, you need to start now if you actually want to move forward in the medium and long term. So I think those signals now would be really meaningful, I guess, in some ways for the short term, but again, to plan out what it really looks like moving forward.
Absolutely. Coming back to the personal stories again, my grandma never had paid sick leave as a personal support worker, and she went to work many times in a great deal of pain because the option was don't show up to work, don't get paid, and also probably get terminated or go to work and suffer through that pain. And this again was decades ago, and we still don't have the policies in place to prevent that from happening. So coming to the medium to long term, then, as we look toward the post-pandemic recovery, and of course, it is, as you said, it's not too early at all to be planning for that. In fact, it's a little bit late to be planning for that. As we talk, we always talk. We talk about a green recovery, but a green recovery to us includes, of course, our social safety net, because those things go hand in hand. Whether climate justice, social justice, racial justice, they're all interconnected. In terms of this post-pandemic recovery. And women and their place right at the heart of it. What do you want to see? What do you both want to see there as absolute priorities? I'll start with you, Katie.
Yeah, well, I think, the pandemic has been different in so many ways. And one of those ways is, again, as we've talked about, what the impact economically has been. If we even look to the 2008 crisis and other types of mass unemployment crises, the response is often, major infrastructure investments in kind of the most traditional sense of the word, which really typically puts men back to work. Great, let's do that, but we need to also understand and conceptualize what it also means to put women back to work. And so there are a number of ways I think that we can do that. Of course, as you note, investing in social infrastructure, whether that's childcare or other. But there's also, perhaps some really meaningful, targeted training and upskilling opportunities. Nancy, I'd be interested to hear your perspective, on how we might support more women taking the risk of becoming an entrepreneur, for example, and things like that. But I think we don't really have a blueprint of getting women back to work in a massive way. And I think that'll be something that is really important in the recovery, and figuring out exactly what that multi-pronged approach looks like will be really important in the medium and long term.
Great. Nancy.
Yeah, I'll just touch briefly on something that Katie said earlier, because I do think that we do need these social supports, particularly for, folks in any facet of the economy, but there's a lot of folks who are in the gig economy or who are working consulting jobs, contract work, et cetera, who maybe don't have access to this kind of sick leave, mental health, childcare, parental leave, and these kinds of senses. And I think that this should be, a priority and supported. I definitely think that childcare is a big one. And I think perhaps this is like quite a long-term goal, although I do think we can start now, is breaking down the gender stereotypes of whose responsibility it is for childcare. I think while we do have, these kinds of policies in place, it will continuously be women's responsibility if we don't say like, hey, look, parents of all different gender identities, et cetera, like it's everyone's responsibility to be taking on childcare, domestic responsibilities, et cetera. I think even with the pandemic, we've seen that with school and daycare closures, it's been women's responsibility. And so, implementing childcare, accessible parental leave for all families, et cetera, but then also just breaking down these gender stereotypes that continue to exist. I think also something that I'd like to see for a long-term goal, although I think we can definitely start now, is just more women in leadership within our economy. So women in, senior executive roles, women on boards, et cetera. And I do think that a lot of times the onus is put on women to, grab these opportunities and take what's yours. And I think that there's value in that, of course. I think women should always be taking the opportunities that they see fit. But I think putting more onus on our institutions to think about how they can better support women in accessing these leadership roles, because then we'll have more voices at the table to ensure that, our recovery strategies are inclusive. And so something that I like to think about is, the supply and demand of women in leadership. So the demand would be, are we ensuring that our institutions are like actually hiring and promoting women and having a real demand for ensuring that their hiring matrices are inclusive, that they have board policies, that they have diversity policies, et cetera. And then, our supply is, of course, ensuring that there's a strong pool of women who are supported, that aren't hitting glass ceilings, but that are like, young women accessing mentoring and sponsorship. And are we ensuring that the ladder is accessible so that women can grow to the top and we're not bottlenecking them at a certain point? So I do think that we can have more inclusive strategies for building back better, as folks are saying, but also just more long-term goals if we have more diverse folks at the leadership table. So perhaps that's a really long-term goal, but that's my thought.
Well, why should it be? It shouldn't be at all. It should be an immediate goal. And you're absolutely right. We know, all three of us here are people who love public policy. I'm a policy analyst by training. I love what the data tells us. And the data does tell us that whether it's the private sector or the public sector or our national assemblies here and elsewhere, that having more diverse representation produces better public policy, more positive, sustainable, long-lasting public policy. It even changes the dynamic of the discussions within those bodies, the priorities, the issues that get spoken about. So we know that it has a positive impact, and so it's something that we need. And I think International Women's Day is a great time to underline that here in Canada, a place that, we like to pride ourselves that we are more inclusive than other societies. At this very moment, between our 10 provinces, 3 territories, and our federal government, there is only one woman leading, only one woman. It's a territorial leader. Other than that, we only have men leading our provinces, territories, and our federal government. And this is 2021. So we do have that work to do, and a report that just came out yesterday, the Rosenzweig report, emphasized that within the business community as well, the numbers are extremely stark when you get to the very top of the ladder, when you get to the C-suite. So there is a great deal of work to be done. Maybe as the last thing that I wanted to ask the two of you about are to just lay out in your mind the consequences of inaction. So what if we don't do these things? If we don't see this kind of, let's say, orientation of the post-pandemic recovery, what can we expect for women in this country? What is the price of inaction in your minds? Katie?
Yeah, that's such a big question. And I'll just actually touch, because I'm going to think about it while I talk, but but a positive of the conversation that we were just having around women in leadership. I'm actually from New Brunswick, and there's a municipal election in May. And there's been a real call for women to run in the municipal election, and it's really it's doing wonderful things. There's so many women that have stepped up to run in the municipal election. And I think a part of the reason for that is the pandemic really has demonstrated just how important our local communities are and what it means and looks like when we don't have access to those local services and those very basic services, even if being able to get outside and get to your library and things like that. So that's a little nugget of hope for me. We've got a lot of women running municipally, so fingers crossed there. I think, the price of inaction is just a total lack of, or lack is not the right word, but I guess a spike in all of the negative stats that we know to be true, right? So perhaps an increase in the pay gap, fewer women in the workforce overall. And Canada already is not amazing on women's economic participation. And what that ends up translating to in meaning is that women are in more vulnerable situations overall. They don't necessarily perhaps have the economic capacity in those cases to leave violent situations, for example, as just one small thing. And we've seen that in the pandemic. We've heard that there is an increase in violence against women. And when we remove women from the economy and force them out, those types of negative statistics will spike. We're already seeing it, and we'll see it long term if we don't meaningfully do something about that. And that's also, the argument again for having kids in schools, right? Like there's a huge priority from a mental health perspective, from a safety perspective, that we actually meaningfully address the school closures and the childcare closures. So I think there's a number of long-term impacts that will exist from the pandemic regardless. But if we don't meaningfully do something about particularly women's economic participation, and not even from the starting point of where we're at in the pandemic, but from really the starting point of where we started, because we weren't doing amazing beforehand anyways, we're just going to be dealing with all of the negative consequences. And those negative consequences are personal, right? Those are individual people that experience them. And I don't think that we as, leaders and policymakers, I don't think we can let those people down, really.
Thank you, Katie. Nancy.
Oh, it's a big question, but I definitely agree with what Katie said. And I think to her point, all of these things feed into one another. So like she mentioned, the shadow pandemic, there is a correlation between women in the workplace. And I think that the private sector does have a role to play in supporting women to ensure that they are in safe situations at home. Childcare, that has an impact on, self-employed women who are then, working from home, et cetera, taking care of kids, or even women who are formally employed who are working from home as well. All of these things kind of play into one another. And so I think there needs to be action in all of these different areas. And if we don't take action, I think I was reading somewhere that this has set us back years in terms of, the women's movement. And I think we'll only continue to be set back further if we don't take action. So I think there's really no option but to act.
Agreed. And just to, I guess, use the platform and the day as an opportunity just to really underline the points that you just made. We know that here and around the world that women have been set back by decades because of the negative impact of the pandemic. And the question is, how much of that ground will we recoup? Because we also know that when women are set back, societies are set back, and it is a major blow to international development. And so whether it's the lessons that we've learned through the pandemic, the impact on, as you said, precarious work, the essential work that women do, the childcare responsibilities of women, the impact of the pandemic on women living in long-term care, because women make up the majority of people living in long-term care as well. This is the time for us to complete our social safety net through things like universal childcare, a guaranteed livable income, universal long-term care, universal access to post-secondary education. These are all important things before, but these are critical things now if we are going to be serious about helping women to catch up the ground that has been lost. And as Katie, you said, go even further, because it wasn't that great to begin with. And so this is an opportunity, as you both said, that we can't pass up. And if you'll just indulge me, because it is International Women's Day, I do really want to point out that we have to remember women around the world and the impact that this has had on them. It has knocked us down in terms of our sustainable progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that women, all the things that you mentioned, domestic violence, the human trafficking of women, the loss of employment, all of those things, these are global phenomenons for women. And so today is the day for us to speak in solidarity with them and think about the ways that we in Canada can support women in other countries. I'm also really mindful of one simple thing that we can do, which is to do our fair share to make sure that the rest of the world is vaccinated. Because again, it's going to be women who are most negatively impacted if we don't share our vaccines and if we take them from facilities like COVAX and the Serum Institute. And then, you know, we are a country that prides itself on having a feminist foreign policy, and so let's make sure that we are looking at all of our foreign policies to support women wherever they are in the world. And I'm thinking in particular now of the Uyghur women who are suffering from unspeakable crimes against humanity for being women and for no other reason, and our responsibilities to them. So yes, I want to thank you both, and also to say that this is an ongoing conversation. We're having these now exactly because we are in the pre-budget part of this session of Parliament. And you know, we hope that having this platform for your messages, your insights, and also your policy recommendations will make it just that little bit more likely that we will have a truly feminist budget and a feminist green recovery. I wanted to thank you very, very much for being with us, and you can just hang on as we go off of Facebook. Je voulais remercier à nos deux invités pour leurs recommandations et leur participation, et pour dire que maintenant, c'est absolument le moment d'assurer que notre relance est une relance féminine, une relance qui met les femmes et leurs besoins urgents au centre de notre politique et de nos plans pour la relance. Et pour dire que nous avons aussi des responsabilités aux femmes partout au monde. Si nous sommes vraiment un pays avec une politique féministe, il faut assurer qu'on soutient les pays, des femmes dans les pays en développement, les femmes qui souffrent par un manque de respect de leurs droits fondamentaux. Et on peut commencer avec une participation dans la livraison des vaccins qui est beaucoup plus équitable, par exemple. Je voulais remercier Katie et Nancy pour leur participation, et nous allons tous espérer que notre prochain budget va être un budget féminin. C'est une conversation qui va continuer. Thank you so much to the two of you. Thank you to everyone who joined us on Facebook this morning. Merci à tout le monde et à la prochaine.